on this Friday night. Federal support during the trade war, the billions in aid.
The steps we are taking as a government to protect our workers and see them through the crisis, come hell or high water.
And Trump's new tariff threats against Canada. Getting tough with Russia? The action Trump says he's considering taking against the Kremlin. New details. What caused the deaths of acting legend Gene Hackman and his wife? Plus, on a wing and a prayer.
We saw a lot of declining species.
What can be done to save the world's butterflies?
Global National, reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. With U.S. President Donald Trump, the political chaos doesn't stop. He made it clear again today he has a bone to pick with Canada. Despite granting some Canadian exports a month-long reprieve from his damaging tariffs just yesterday, Trump threatened new ones in the Oval Office today, this time targeting Canadian lumber and dairy.
Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not going to happen anymore.
Now Trump is threatening equally high reciprocal tariffs on Canadian products, which he says could begin as soon as today or early next week. In the meantime, our federal government has unveiled a new multi-billion-dollar plan to help Canadian business and workers impacted by the trade war. Touria Izri breaks down the relief efforts and Trump's latest complaints.
The whims of the White House keep changing on a dime.
They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it. And that's what reciprocal means.
Donald Trump issued a new threat targeting more Canadian industries.
They make it impossible for us to sell lumber or dairy products into Canada.
The U.S. president's 11th tariff announcement in 2.5 months.
With respect to dairy, I learned about it just as you said, just as I was walking into this press conference.
Trump paused tariffs on goods that fall under the North American Free Trade Deal, CUSMA, until April 2nd. But Ottawa is not waiting until then to roll out relief.
We're launching a new trade impact program.
The federal government unveiled a $6.5 billion aid package. $5 billion for the new Trade Impact Program to help exporters find other markets. $1 billion in Farm Credit Canada financing and $500 million in business loans.
The ball seems to bounce every day. We have every intention of customizing response to tariffs or no tariffs.
Canada is going ahead with $30 billion in counter tariffs, but has pushed back its second round worth $125 billion to coincide with Trump's April 2nd deadline. Like the Liberals, the Conservative leader says the monthly melodrama needs to end.
My message to the president is this: knock it off. Stop the chaos.
Chaos marking the final days of Justin Trudeau's time in office.
This will be my last public event as Prime Minister. As a country, we just have to hold on.
A tariff on dairy would hit Quebec especially hard. It has the largest industry in the country, which is heavily protected. The Americans launched a complaint under the CUSMA deal in 2023, but the panel sided with Canada. Neithu?
All right, Touria Izri in Montreal. Thanks, Touria. The on-again, off-again threats of tariffs sent chills through Canadian employers last month. According to Stats Canada, the economy added just 1,100 jobs in February. That's far below the increase of 20,000 economists had expected. The unemployment rate held steady at 6.6%, a sign that Canadian employers were not turning to mass layoffs ahead of the tariffs. We have some breaking news tonight. Hudson's Bay has filed for creditor protection as it restructures its business. It has also secured some emergency financing. The department store chain, founded in 1670, says it's been facing significant pressures, including lower consumer spending and trade tensions with the U.S. Hudson's Bay, one of Canada's most recognizable retail brands, operates more than 80 stores across the country. Trump's chaotic policies have also left the American economy reeling. The uncertainty alone is already putting upward pressure on prices, despite the president's earlier promises to make life more affordable for Americans. And within industries deeply integrated across the Canada-U.S. border, officials warn American jobs are now at risk. Heather Yourex-West looks at the growing frustration stateside.
Welcome, everyone.
Mayors from 30 cities on either side of the Canada-U.S. border came to Washington this week with a message for the U.S. president. This trade war needs to end.
We all understand how interconnected our economy is. What's good for one of us is good for the other. What's problematic or what's, dare I say it, bad for one of us is going to be bad for the other.
The mayor of Portage, Indiana, a steel town, says the jobs of U.S. workers are on the line. While in Mount Vernon, New York, retaliatory tariffs on Ontario electricity exports could cost families an extra $2,000 a year.
Anything that can put an end to the trade war and really drill down and focus on what the real issues are so that we don't have blanket tariffs, I think will be important to the average New York working family.
What we are trying to do is make free trade fair trade, because the trading systems have become incredibly imbalanced.
While the U.S. Treasury Secretary took to CNBC Friday to defend the president's actions on tariffs, the U.S. stock market limped to the end of its worst week in months.
It's absolute chaos, unprecedented in U.S. history. What it is doing is depressing investment in the business sector and in agriculture.
Americans are taking greater notice of Canadian anger now, too. In headlines making reference to the elbows up hockey call to action on CNN, and viral social media posts like author Stephen King sharing a shot of this angry graffiti scrawled on Calgary's Centre Street Bridge.
The move to take U.S. alcohol off Canadian shelves also getting American attention on late-night talk shows and from U.S. alcohol CEOs. But whether any of this can stop the chaos seems unlikely, with the U.S. president determined to follow through on his tariff plans at some point, somehow. Neetu?
All right, Heather Yourex-West in Washington. Thanks, Heather. For the first time in his second presidency, Donald Trump is suggesting he may apply pressure on Russia to strike a peace deal with Ukraine. He says he is strongly considering new sanctions in response to Russia's bombardment of Ukraine. It's a major change in tone for Trump, who's been turning up the heat on Ukraine, pulling military aid and intelligence sharing. Redmond Shannon reports.
From Odessa in the south to Kharkiv in the northeast, a barrage of Russian attacks targeting infrastructure across Ukraine. This woman fled her home near the front line, only to see shells land outside her Kharkiv apartment. Ukraine's ability to intercept these attacks affected by the United States' pause on military aid and intelligence support. Ukraine has already been blocked from accessing satellite images provided by the US government.
They don't have the cards.
Still talking tough against Ukraine, Donald Trump is now also suggesting Vladimir Putin is making the most of this advantage.
I think he's hitting him harder than he's been hitting him. And I think probably anybody in that position would be doing that right now.
Trump says he's now considering putting new sanctions and tariffs on Russia until the war's over. The first pressure he's publicly put on Russia since taking office in January.
I put a statement in, a very strong statement. Can't do that.
There's no reason at the moment why Vladimir Putin would believe that the United States is serious about actually using coercive diplomacy.
European Union leaders have agreed to significantly ramp up defence spending. On Friday, the bloc briefed Justin Trudeau and other NATO allies, but not the US. In Poland, change is already apparent. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says he wants to see every adult male get mandatory military training. One European leader won't be joining any new coalition to help Ukraine. Hungary's Viktor Orban. He says if Ukraine couldn't win the war with US help, then there's no chance it can do so without it. Neetu?
All right, Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. And 3 Bulgarians have been convicted of spying for Russia. They were arrested in a London raid 2 years ago. Police found recording equipment and hidden cameras in plush toys, glasses, and a pop bottle. The trio traveled Europe carrying out surveillance, including at a U.S. airbase in Germany where Ukrainian troops were believed to be training. They also plotted to kidnap and kill targets. In Syria, more than 200 people have been killed in 2 days of fighting between the new government's security forces and gunmen loyal to former leader Bashar al-Assad. The violence began Thursday when a Syrian police patrol was ambushed. As Jeff Semple reports, the battles threaten to upend Syria's fragile peace.
Gun battles in the streets of Syria. We say to the old regime's remnants that you're losing. The Syrian people are one, this pro-government protester says. Fighting has erupted between Syria's transitional government forces and rebel groups still loyal to the ousted regime of Bashar al-Assad. The rebels are members of Assad's Alawite religious minority, many of whom served in his military.
The administration has been doing what they call combing operations to try to root out these cadres of the former regime.
Ordinary Alawite civilians say they're also being targeted. We call on the government to strike with an iron fist. The time for forgiveness has ended, this pro-government protester says. But the prospect of rebel groups igniting another civil war in Syria seems unlikely. Their main foreign backers are Iran and Hezbollah.
Hezbollah's power to do so has been largely decimated through its year-long war with the Israelis. No one in Syria wants Iran back.
Syria remains a mishmash of fragile alliances and competing foreign influences. The interim HTS government controls Damascus. It's backed by Turkey, which opposes the Kurdish forces that control the north and are backed by the U.S. The Americans also back Israel, which controls a buffer zone in the south.
The new authorities in Syria are walking on a tightrope that's being pulled from every direction over a pit of fire.
If Syria descends into violence, it risks provoking another refugee crisis and the escape of numerous ISIS prisoners held by the Kurds.
The fear is that these fighters can escape and potentially restart basically ISIS.
Syria rests on a knife edge between stability and chaos. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
A disposal operation of an unexploded bomb from the Second World War led to major transportation delays in Paris today. Police called the bomb excessively dangerous. It was dug up near train tracks north of Paris, with experts managing to unscrew and destroy the fuse. But it led to the shutdown of high-speed trains between London and Brussels. About 600,000 people were affected at France's busiest train station. Canada has expanded its list of banned assault-style firearms. It now includes another 179 automatic and semi-automatic weapons.
This prohibition takes effect immediately. It is our hope, our government's intention, that this be the last discrete listing of assault-style firearms for prohibition.
The federal government says the weapons exceed safe civilian use. Officials are also launching a review of the firearms classification system to help close gaps in the law. And there are plans to announce new rules for individual gun owners in the spring. A buyback program is in place to compensate affected businesses. Since May of 2020, about 2,500 types of guns have been banned in this country. The federal government launched a new online passport renewal system today and also gave a new guarantee to help speed up processing times. Effective later this year, anyone who completes a Canadian passport application or renewal, whether being online, in person, or by mail, and does not receive their documents within 30 business days, well, they'll be free and a full refund issued. It has been more than a week since actor Gene Hackman and his wife were found dead. And tonight we've learned how the couple died, what police are saying, coming up. New Mexico's chief coroner has revealed how actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy died. Their bodies were discovered at their Santa Fe home on February 26th. Investigators believe Betsy, 65, died 2 weeks earlier from hantavirus, which is spread via rodent droppings. Gene, 95, likely died a week later of natural causes related to a variety of medical conditions.
Mr. Hackman showed evidence of advanced Alzheimer's disease. I'm not aware of what his normal daily functioning capability was. He was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease.
The coroner also said Hackman may not have known his wife had died and noted pills found near her body were thyroid medication and not linked to her death. A second person in the U.S. is believed to have died from measles. Health officials in New Mexico say an unvaccinated adult who tested positive for measles has died. They did not seek medical treatment, and the official cause of death is still under investigation. In Texas last month, an unvaccinated child died of measles, the country's first measles death in a decade. The Texas outbreak is growing with more than 150 cases reported. 10 cases have been identified in New Mexico. Canada's top doctor is warning about a surge of measles in this country ahead of spring break travel. 227 cases have been detected here. Teresa Tam says the number of cases is a concerning trend. Cases have been recorded in New Brunswick, Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and BC. Prince Edward Island has become the third province to sign a Pharmacare deal with the federal government. The agreement, worth $30 million over 4 years, gives people in PEI universal access to contraceptive and diabetes medications and goes into effect May 1st. BC signed a 4-year, $670 million Pharmacare agreement with the federal government yesterday. Manitoba became the first province to join the Liberals' Pharmacare push last week. Review released. Ahead, what went wrong with an investigation that sent 2 innocent men to jail for murder. There was a stark admission from the police department in St. John, New Brunswick today. The force saying publicly and for the first time that, quote, tunnel vision was the main reason Walter Gillespie and Robert Mailman were wrongfully convicted for a murder 40 years ago. As Heidi Petracek explains, there are concerns new procedures will make reviews of wrongful conviction cases more difficult.
We echo the Court of King's Bench in expressing our profound regret.
St. John's Police Chief acknowledged the force's investigation into the 1983 murder got it horribly wrong.
And if I could change anything from back then, I would. But I can't.
The summary of an independent report into how the case was handled was released Friday, highlighting significant information gaps and an investigation in which it says tunnel vision had taken hold, leading the investigators' efforts in their pursuit of the accused. Last year, the 2 men convicted as a result were exonerated.
No, I'd just like to thank everybody.
Walter Gillespie and Robert Mailman had each spent 20 years in prison. Last year, Gillespie died, and Mailman is seriously ill with cancer.
He told me during our call this morning that the thing that would satisfy him is if the St. John Police Force acknowledged mistakes and released the full unredacted report to the public.
Innocence Canada worked on the case for years. It also wants accountability from the investigators involved at the time, which the head of the force rejects, citing lack of malicious intent.
It's not enough to say, okay, you went to jail for 20 years, we screwed up. There's always someone accountable, or there should be someone accountable.
Ottawa is establishing a new independent commission to review wrongful conviction cases. It's meant to make the process easier. But there are already concerns police may push back on providing the commission with sensitive evidence.
Because one of the differences is the commission will have a statutory obligation to make public its reasons. Will they even have adequate powers to get the information?
The long road to justice in this case may be coming to an end, but many others are still waiting, more than 100 being reviewed by Innocence Canada alone. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Protecting pollinators. Next, the concern over declining butterfly populations. Butterflies are known for pollinating plants and for their sheer beauty, but the population in the United States has plummeted by nearly a fifth over the past quarter century. Mike Armstrong on the reasons why and the need for more protection.
Just the number is bad enough, but scientists say the timeline is shocking. The continental U.S. has lost 22% of its butterflies in just 20 years.
The trend is linear and downward. Butterflies have been declining for the last 20 years, and that decline is not stopping.
The team of scientists runs 35 monitoring programs across the U.S. The study's findings are based on more than 76,000 surveys. The decline is small annually, only about 1% a year, but it adds up.
If you imagine you went out to go watch butterflies in 2000 and you saw 100, and you went back to the same site in 2020, you'd probably only see 80 individuals.
Now, some regions have even bigger drops. The Southwest has lost more than half its butterflies. Climate change and drought are factors there. In the Midwest, insecticides are the problem. One of the reasons scientists are warning about the loss of butterflies is their role in pollination.
We often think about bees, but for example, butterflies contribute about $100 million a year to pollination of cotton just in Texas.
Now, the other issue is one scientists can't study. You can watch and count butterflies. Well, that's not possible with bees or flies or beetles, but this study's findings don't point to positive news for them.
All of the things that are harmful to butterflies are also harmful to these other species. So we have every reason to think that these declines are representative of other insect species.
The study's results were negative enough that seeing them, some researchers were brought to tears. But there is hope. With better control of pesticides and work to promote habitats, butterfly populations can rebound. The study also found they're doing better in northern regions. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canadas are from Cold Lake, Alberta, Bradford, Ontario, and Powell River, BC. Please keep emailing us your pictures of Canadian pride. Thanks for watching.